where does creativity come from? Like, how come the two other members of my group play 3 times, 4 times better than I do?
Welcome to Spiritual Rockstar Podcast, where world-changing spiritual entrepreneurs come to deeply awaken the power within to bring forth their greatest purpose, while enjoying being in tune with all life and real wealth in all aspects of their lives. I'm your host, Daniel John Hanneman. And welcome everybody to the Spiritual Rockstar Podcast Show. I am so grateful to have you here. I've got a fantastic guest. He's done all kinds of amazing things. Too many to name, but I will get into it a little bit in the introduction here. And he's going to be really helping you to realize what's possible in optimizing your creativity. He's a massive expert in optimizing your creativity and helping you to really get into optimal zone of performance, which we all can use. You know, a lot of times we think this is for high performance athletes and executives and stuff, like only it's for you guys, but it's also for all of us can utilize that. So I'm grateful to have you here today, Dr. Ron.
Pleasure to be here.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to share more about you for a moment with everybody. Ronald A. Alexander, PhD, is the author of the new book, Core Creativity, The Mindful Way to Unlock Your Creative Self. He is the creativity coach, consultant, and mind-body psychotherapist. He has a private psychotherapy and executive coaching practice in Santa Monica, California. He's the executive director of the OpenMind Training Program that offers personal and professional training programs in mindfulness-based therapies, transformational leadership, and meditation, one of my favorites. He is also the author of the highly acclaimed book, Wise Mind, Open Mind, Finding Purpose and Meaning in Times of Crisis, Loss, and Change. And you can learn more about him at www.corecreativity.com. All right, so I know you just came up with this new book that's coming out or is out, Core Creativity, and I wanted to start actually to talk to you a little bit about what led you to write this book. What led you to write this book on creativity?
Well, historically, when I was an adolescent, I was spending most of my weekends in Harvard Square, right across from the university, studying in the bookstores Zen Buddhism and anything that I could get my hands on that had to do with creativity, like Leonardo da Vinci, Shakespeare. And I was also playing in a musical group with two friends, and we would, in the afternoon, I would hang out at the bookstores, and then in the evenings, we would go to various music clubs. In history, it was called Club 47. It's where people like Joan Baez or Tom Rush or Bob Dylan, Simon and Garfunkel got their starts. And so I was really fascinated at a very young age in the creative process, and playing music with gifted musicians led me to be curious about where does creativity come from? Like, how come the two other members of my group play 3 times, 4 times better than I do? Is that a gift? Are they working harder at practicing than I am? Do they go to see a tutor more often than I do? Because I was being tutored in the guitar and keyboards at the time. And so fast forward to when I finished my undergraduate training at the University of Massachusetts in Amherst. I did focus, though, on my end of my 4th year at taking courses at Hampshire College. And Hampshire College is a small private college that's primarily for creative students interested in music, film, art, painting, sculpturing. And it was there I was studying under an MIT professor who had left MIT to come and teach at Hampshire. His name was Dr. Larry Domash. And he was very involved with the Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, who was the founder of transcendental meditation. I had already, prior to meeting him, immersed myself in Zen meditation, in the study of Zen Buddhism, and mindfulness meditation through studying with Jack Kornfield and Joseph Goldstein at the Insight Meditation Society in Barre, Massachusetts. And so I was completely open to the transcendental meditational approach. And in many of his classes, several weeks in the various classes I took with him, one was called the Physics of Consciousness, one was on altered states of consciousness, is he emphasized the relationship between creativity and meditation and spiritual studies.
Mhm.
So later in my matriculation, when I was finished with my graduate studies, by hook or crook, I ended up in Los Angeles, and I helped to create at Cedars-Sinai Medical Office Center the Center for Health and Healing, which was a combination of about 22 medical doctors, psychologists, body workers, breath workers, acupuncturists, homeopaths, iridologists, diet therapists, holistic dental therapists. We had a couple of chiropractors. And so in that first year where I was, in addition to starting my private psychotherapy practice, I started coaching and consulting to the television, film, and music industries. First with talent, and then second with the suits, the administrative people, the executives.
Mhm.
And so I was extremely interested that people started coming into my private practice who were television writers, directors, musicians, and then from the art world, painters and sculptors is in Los Angeles, of creativity. What is the spark? Why are some people able to actualize their creativity more than other people are able to actualize their creativity? And I was very curious and, did a very deep dive for the last 48 years in private practice, working with across the board, all of those types of creatives. Do they have a particular direct access from the outside to the inside, where they're able to access a portal to what I call the creative unconscious, where in my first book, I articulated the notion of wise mind, open mind.
Mhm.
Wise mind coming from the Buddhist concepts that there is wise mind, big mind, and no mind. And so I was in Vienna visiting Mozart's house, which is a museum now. And I saw in one of his handwritten notes the phrase, he was communicating to another musician, the importance of open mind awareness. And so on that same trip, I had the opportunity to catch up with some of the members of U2 in Dublin and to sit and to talk about, just friend to friend, not anything professional, how they had downloaded this new form of their music, which was the album Achtung Baby. And prior to that, their last really successful album was called The Joshua Tree. And
Mhm.
extremely different and very divergent musical pathways. And so we were talking about that, and at one juncture, the guitarist said to me that he oftentimes dreams and he hears the melodies and the music. And when he meditates, and I believe he's a practitioner of yoga, he'd be driving around and the new sound just comes down like a download to him. And we were talking about, well, he mentioned to me, he said, what do you think about that? And I said, well, that's what I call open mind. There's big mind and wise mind in the spiritual traditions. An open mind is a specific state of consciousness that creatives are very easily able to access, even if they're not meditators. For example, if you think about in modern day music, in my generation, you have guys like David Crosby, Stephen Stills, Neil Young, and they're like 16, 17 years old, and they're playing prolifically. Like of all those three musicians I mentioned, every single one of them can play drums, bass, organ, electric, lead guitar, acoustic guitar, rhythm guitar, mandolin. And how does a person at such a young age, none of them read music, none of them have had any classical musical training. Well, in my discussions with many musicians, and when I was listening to Robbie Robertson of the band in his documentary, When We Were Brothers, he says, well, the creativity comes from the trunk of our imagination. And so that's like just a wonderfully rich image. That creativity comes from the trunk of our imagination, and that our narrative, the story that we live from the time we're born up to where we are, is all fertile ground to harvest for accessing one's creativity. And so, for example, in songwriters, he was saying that when they were the backup band for Ronnie Hawk of the Ronnie Hawkins and the Hawks, that they would travel. It was called the Chitlin circuit. They would travel through all these small little clubs in the South for years. And Robbie Robertson was 16 years old when he was invited by Ronnie Hawkins to become the lead guitarist in the band. And the drummer was Levon Helm. And then Robbie Robertson brought on Rick Danko, the bass player, and Garth Hudson, and then Richard Manuel, the keyboardist and organ player, to all be the backup of Ronnie Hawkins and the Hawks, which then led to Bob Dylan hearing about Robbie Robertson, and then he recruited them for his very first world tour of America and Europe, because they were so prolifically gifted as musicians. And what's interesting, other than Garth Hudson, who was classically trained, and his parents went way out of their way to ensure that he was going to have a classical music background. All of these other musicians I've mentioned, and some of which I've interviewed in the more recent book, Core Creativity, have a spontaneous creative ability to link up and to play music and to write music and to play 6, 7, 8 instruments intuitively. And so linking it back to wise mind, open mind, is I believe that open mind is a portal, if you will, or a state of consciousness. Sometimes people like to think of it in terms of 3D is our everyday life, our normal waking state. 4D is our dream state when we're dreaming. And creatives like Mozart, Beethoven, Robert Louis Stevenson, the scientist that discovered the benzene ring with two snakes eating each other, dreamt about all these incredible creative breakthroughs. And then you have 5D, which is open mind, open-minded consciousness, is when we're able to shift internally from ordinary waking state. We link up to 4D, which is the dream state. And then we're able to directly access our creativity through our creative unconscious, that portal of open-minded awareness.
Mm-hmm.
And so in the book, Core Creativity, what's unique about it is that not only does it cover experience in what I refer to as highly gifted creatives, but that we all have the ability to download from the inside out and access our creative unconscious. For example, the esteemed and renowned Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung, he described some of the cartography that I'm describing to you in terms of the conscious self, the pre-conscious self, the individual collective unconscious, the racial collective unconscious, and then the spiritual unconscious. And so in that topography, creativity is the exchange between the personal unconscious, the collective unconscious, the racial unconscious, and the spiritual unconscious. That in visiting, in penetrating the very thin membranes between those states in the unconscious, there resides, in the words of Saint Teresa of Avila, in the center chamber of our spiritual, our divine self, is a diamond. And that diamond is a representation of a cauldron or a resource of profound creativity. And we're all able to access that. Now, am I going to become, as a guitarist, the next Robbie Robertson in this lifetime? No. Or the next George Harrison? No, not gonna happen.
Hmm.
But can I make progress? And can I learn to write songs and be a songwriter? Yeah. Because the second has to do with hard work, discipline, and the accessing of your own creative portal. Becoming a highly gifted artist in some form doesn't have a lot to do with discipline. Although anyone who's creative will tell you, regardless of how great the gift is. I was at a meeting to discuss Tantra once in a few years back with in several celebrities were there, and this one very renowned and highly respected actress, music singer, writer, director, said, yeah, I have a fantastic gift that I was blessed with karmically. And then she paused and she said, and then there's the 10,000 hours that I put in.
Right. Right.
And once I was having a conversation at the great late Zen meditator and poet and musician Leonard Cohen. And I said, how much of it is gift? Because he referred to himself in one of his songs as I was born with the gift of a golden voice. And he said, yeah. And then there's also the 10,000 hours that you have to put into. For example, I think it took him 14 years to craft Hallelujah from the beginning to the end before he actually pushed it out into the world. So there's a balance between accessing that we're all capable of our core creativity, and some of us that have a particular gift and hard work and effort and discipline and perseverance needs to go in to all of those formulas.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's interesting. I mean, it's definitely I tend to avoid the hard work kind of languaging, but yeah, putting in the time, the energy, the focus, absolutely, the dedication to it. So Yeah, that's so interesting. That 10,000 hour thing is something I've heard about a lot. Like to
Yeah,
really become an expert in anything, you're gonna need at least 10,000 hours. I've heard that. I don't even know where that idea started, but it's an interesting concept.
yeah, and I think it's an interesting concept that links into the concept of how do you use spirituality and creativity with optimal and peak performance. In the early 70s, when I was studying Kundalini yoga, I was introduced to a doctor named Dr. Leroy Perry, who runs the International Sports Medicine Foundation in Culver City. And at that time, he was a, a sports medicine doctor to teams outside of the USA because his background was he was a chiropractor. And so he couldn't get on the US medical team because he wasn't an MD. And so he linked up, and one team in each foreign country after another found out about him. He used to be referred to as Dr. Magic Fingers. And he was sharing with me that he was working with an American named Dwight Stone, who was an Olympic high jumper.
Mhm.
Was working with him privately. And I was at the Olympics in LA in 84, I think it was. And I noticed that Dwight Stone, before he would participate in the high jump, is that he was sitting under the high jump net um, every time that before he took a jump, and he was meditating. So I asked Dr. Perry, was he meditating or what exactly was he doing? Dr. Perry said he was visualizing every step up to taking the jump. And then he was visualizing himself in the air, going across the bar and coming down and landing successfully. And that's what I call mind training. And in
Mhm.
my first book, Wise Mind, Open Mind, I coined the term for Western psychology and Buddhism is um, mind strength. Is that through mindfulness meditation and or any form of spiritual practice, transcendental meditation, Zen meditation, Tai Chi, Qigong, Christian contemplative prayer, that we build in the neurons of our brain in similar fashion. We're constantly building new neuronal train tracks. And we can actually, with using PET scans and uh, MRIs, we can scan the brain and we can see in the uh, right mid insula that through meditative practice for as minimal of 20 minutes a day, there's an increase in the production of the gray mass brain cells that are responsible for concentration, focus, memory. And then the hippocampus is responsible for new learnings. And that's so through spiritual practices like mindfulness meditation or Zen or transcendental meditation practice, we're building new neuronal tracks where not hundreds and not thousands, but hundreds of millions of new neurons are created and are circulating through our brain when we sit and do a spiritual practice.
Mhm.
And this is something that is very, very important for anyone who wants to enhance their ability to be in the zone. And I didn't directly work with the LA Lakers, but I was involved with working with some of the family members.
Mhm.
And I was told that Phil Jackson, who is also a Zen meditator,
Mhm.
and as having been a personal player, he really intuitively understands what it's called to be in the zone as a professional basketball player and when a team is playing in the zone. And he very routinely led the Lakers during all of the various incarnations that he was coaching through Zen meditation as part of their practice and some yoga. And so yogic practice is like a therapy. Zen meditation is really like a therapy for building and harnessing concentration and brain power. And so if you think of when you're out of shape and your doctor tells you need to get in shape and you need to, for your bone development, you need to build some more muscular structure. When you first start going into a gym, you can't lift much weight and you're huffing and puffing. But after like a month or 2 months, you can lift a lot of weight and you're not huffing and puffing. So mind strength is akin to what we do physiologically when we work out in a gym. But we're using our mind, connecting to our brain and our nervous system to build mind strength, which is more focused power, more focused attention, more focused awareness, which then elevates us up into the zone of peak performance. Most athletes will tell you that they either organically meditate or they do some sort of structured meditation. Many that I've talked to organically will say, yeah, I just sit quietly before I go to practice or a game. I just sit there. And what they're really saying is, I meditate before a game because there's a connection between slowing things down in the mind, clearing out the distress and all the distraction that then makes us be able to function at a much more optimal and highly attuned mode when whatever game we're playing in, if we're an athlete with a band, when you go and you listen to a group playing, like I recently was up with my girlfriend in Santa Barbara, and we saw this musician from Colorado. His name is Gregory Isakov. And he said it straight out in the beginning of the night when he was introducing his band. He said, we've been playing together since we were teenagers. And then, he took a breath and he said, and that's why we're at the top of our game. And attunement comes from spiritually attuning ourselves. As a musician, I know you can't play an instrument and you can't play in a band unless your instruments are attuned.
Right.
And as a teacher, as a healer, as a therapist, as a coach, a consultant, each and every day, I sit and I meditate to attune myself and my instrument so that when I'm either teaching or I'm engaged in private one-on-one work or group work, I'm more finely attuned. Tune the self so that you can then attune to others.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's one of the things I loved about having you on the show, because I'm always talking to my clients and everybody about meditating, and my website. The main opt-in gift for years has been meditate and make money, because I'm focused on that for businesses. So what I wanted to ask you is, there's some people, I'm not one of them right now. I do a number of meditations through the day, but they're usually, compared to some people, shorter. These days, 10, 20 minutes range, probably most of them, some of them longer, some of them shorter. And I like doing multiple meditations in a day. I know some people really swear by like these practices where they get up and they meditate for an hour or two or whatever, right? We've heard everything out there, all kinds of practices. And some people say you're only getting started after the first hour, or something like that. I've heard people say things like that. Um, what's your experience with so much decades of experience with, meditators and performance and everything? What have you seen about that with people that meditate really, really in depth every single day? Is it really a whole breakthrough game changer for people in so many different ways to go so much deeper? Or is it, to me, I always say you have to be consistent. Number one, you can do all the deep meditation, but you better be
Right.
consistent. So what have you found with that? Because I'm very curious about that.
Well, that's a very good question because it isn't easy to answer with any
Mhm.
simplicity,
Yeah.
other than to say that if you do something to attune your instrument of self spiritually, some form of meditation or yogic practice, what I've come to discover is it's not the amount of time, it's the quality of what you're doing when you're doing it. So
Mhm.
if you sit for 1, 2, 3 hours and all you're doing is spacing out, that's not wisely used.
Mhm.
You, if when I sit and sometimes I only have like a 10-minute period before I could do a longer sit later in the day.
Mhm.
If I stay completely focused on my breath or on the mantra or on the process of deepening the spiritual inquiry, and
Mhm.
bring great attention and concentration to that, I can get in 5 to 10 to 12 minutes as good a result as I get after I sit normally for 40 minutes.
Mhm.
It's
Mhm.
the quality of how I'm meditating.
Mhm.
Now, the old Eastern wisdom traditions used to say it's the number of hours that you meditate a day, the number of years and decades in order to go from the unenlightened stage of awakening to a fully enlightened stage of awakening. About 7 years or 8 years ago, a researcher who was at Mass General Hospital at the time, her name was Dr. Sarah Lazar, and she's now at the Harvard Mind Brain Body Institute, Harvard University. She did a series of meditational studies where she took college-aged fraternity boys from MIT who had no experience, like 12 of them, no experience in meditation. And something very, very remarkable came out in the study is that she also studied sophisticated long-term Asian meditators who had been practicing for like 30 years or more. And she found a high number of the uh, early novice meditators, say out of 12, maybe like I think the number was 3, 4, were able to attain the same level of sophistication meditatively, and what we refer to as samadhi.
Mhm.
Samadhi practice was as intense and as highly focused as some of the meditators that have been meditating for 30 years, whether they were monks or lamas. And so,
Mhm.
since that study, it's profoundly influenced me and the entire field of the science of meditation, that it's not about the number of years that you sit on the cushion. It's more about the quality of what you do with yourself when you're sitting on the cushion.
Mhm.
And so
Mhm.
I think it's important to hold both frameworks, that
Mhm.
the longer that you can sit throughout a day over time, the 10,000 hour model, the more proficient you will become. And that's been
Yes.
my practical experience. I can say I'm a better meditator today at age 73 than I was when I started at age 20.
Right. Totally.
However, I have a good friend and colleague named Locke Kelly, and he was teaching a meditation course. He calls it effortless mindfulness down in Costa Rica in February. So he invited me down. I've been wanting to go to Costa Rica for years, and so I went down. And the way that he teaches is in very, very short, like 5 minute, he calls them glimpses, 20-minute glimpse meditations. And it's not formal. There's no structure like Zen or Vipassana or Tibetan meditation. It's just he says you just have to drop in,
Yeah.
effortlessly. And after spending a week there and having lunch and breakfast and dinner with many, many participants from all walks of life, there was a psychiatrist from Santa Barbara, and she and I were talking, and this was like one of her first meditational retreats. And she said that she experienced this profound ability from day 1 to day 6 in her capacity to meditate. And so just in a short period of a week, she had this profound breakthrough. And again, we weren't meditating all day long like we do on like traditional meditational retreats.
Right.
Short little meditations. So quantity, quality, not quantity, is something that we need to be alert and to work with. And quality also lessens the rigidity that we can develop by thinking that it's more about more and more structured, rigid hours of the day, and less of that, and more melting of the rigidity, and more being in the flow and sitting and honoring your flow. So, for example, because I'm so busy in my career, I do structure how many minutes in the morning, how many minutes in the afternoon. But on the weekends, what I'll do is I'll just sit and I'll see how long I sit without any structure. And sometimes it's 20 minutes, and sometimes it's 2 hours. So when you melt rigidity around practice, you open up a space for more creativity to flow, even in your spiritual practice, which then allows more and more creativity to flow and for you to be in the zone more in whatever you're doing.
Do you want to meditate and make money? Let it be simple. Let it be easy. Let it be fun. Go to yoursacredpurpose.com and get your free meditate, make money meditation today. Oh, that's cool. Yeah, that's interesting because yeah, I would say someone like me tends to be the structured, focused, disciplined type. There's not an exact precise time that I do the meditation exactly, but it's pretty much the same time every round, like the 3 rounds I usually do each day during the week. I'm like, okay, time to meditate, and then there's usually a time frame. I've got to be done by this, so I can go do that then, and then. So I think that's cool. The idea of I don't know that I've done a lot of that. I mean, I'm sure I've done it at some point, but just like, okay, we have no idea how long I'm going to meditate. It's not even a question. I just drop in, and when it wants to be done, it's done, and then just get up and then move on from there in that connected flow. And I think that's really cool. I know I've done that on retreats, I'm sure, like just sitting around, okay, I'm okay, sit here, kind of thing. But yeah, that's really a great tip because we get so caught up in our patterns of doing anything, including meditation, that we're I'm a believer of structure, but I think sometimes we like you said, get too rigid. So that sounds like that would be a great enhancer to optimizing flow for sure.
And what meditational approaches have you been on retreat with?
Well, you're familiar with Adi Shanti, for example. Yeah, I
Yes.
went to like those are the biggest ones I've done. I've never done the longer Vipassana ones, but I just went to his like I think they were like 5 days or something like that. The silent
Yeah.
meditation retreat ones. Yeah, did
Uh,
it.
well,
Those, yeah.
Locke Kelly was a student and now they're peers of Adyashanti. And
Mm,
I
mm.
listen to Adyashanti frequently, and I really respect and appreciate his voice. And he came from the Zen tradition also,
Yes, yes, yes.
originally, and then he evolved into the non-dual.
Right, right, right. Very, very, very tough stuff. He's like, we don't need to sit in a lotus position. I blew out my knees doing that. Like, I
Right.
remember that. I think the first time I went to see him. But so you talked about so the couple of things that came through is a number of things came through today, but um to optimize, your being in the flow optimizes your performance in anything. So whether it's at your job, your business, or at home, or whatever, you're more in that spontaneous connection with what you're calling um, core creativity, right? So you're in that connection. And from that place, I mean, all kinds of, that's where all the cool stuff happens, they say, right? Like,
That's right. And one of my mentors, Dr. Stanley Krippner, during the 70s, he was working very closely in researching parapsychology and psychic phenomena, and he was involved in psychedelic research and experimentation. And he spent a lot of time with different members of the Grateful Dead, and he was sharing with us in a seminar once that they oftentimes reported that if one of them uh, came to perform at a concert and one was really centered in the zone, that the other members would creatively and spontaneously end up attuning to him.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
And then it was like the 100th monkey phenomena. One person gets in the zone, brings the other person into the zone, brings the other person into the zone. And next thing you know, the entire band is playing in the zone. And I had a wonderful experience. I've had that happen many, many different times in many different concerts that I've attended.
mm-hmm,
But one that, I will absolutely never, ever forget was a concert that I attended around 1989 or 90, and it was with Neil Young and his band Crazy Horse at
mm-hmm.
the LA Arena. Um, and that I could see from where they started in the first hour, that they were gradually, almost like in a spiral, intensifying into the zone of open mind. And then there was a moment, a long moment, where they were at optimal, absolute unified consciousness. Every member was connected and attuned with every other member of the band. And they just took us on this incredible magical ride for the next 90 minutes. And then we started coming down from it. And it was just extraordinary. And I remember turning to my girlfriend at the time and saying, that was a peak experience. They,
Mm-hmm.
they, they were all in the zone. And now the whole arena was in the zone.
Yeah, wow.
Optimal.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of those things that almost gives you goosebumps, right? It's like, man, what we can tap into and what's possible there. Because I'm all about like us connecting with that universal divine energy at the higher frequency. And we're been so suppressed from that, it seems like, with all this Western energy or whatever you want to call it, like getting more into the rational thinking mind, which has its place. But yeah, in this kind of higher kind of consciousness, there's so much more available, so much more that's possible. And and you did also, I wanted to ask you this question because we are getting near the end of our time. I got to ask you, like, what are some of the other things we talked about, like meditation? You mentioned yoga. You talked about putting in the hours, things like that. What are some of the other like more bullet points? Like, what are some other things that really help put people into their core creativity that helps them like make everything more effortless, easier, and at the top of their game? Like, what are some other practices or things they can do?
Well, one of the practices I've been studying for the last 5 years, I started the first year before COVID was Tai Chi Chuan. And I practiced with a Chinese master for an hour a week of individual tutoring. And I have found over the course of the last 4 or 5 years that I'm much more in tune with my own sense of somatic sense of self and well-being. And I'm also in tune now much more with how people are moving around me and how I'm interacting with how people are moving around me. So that's a good one. Another avenue is what we call in the Taoist tradition, the walk in nature, is to spend some time walking through a forest or by a lake or by the ocean or by a stream, because nature will nurture your core creativity and allow you to tap into the zone more fluidly and more easily. And then it goes without saying, any amount of time that you can spend daily listening to music, but in a actual structured way, meaning I direct the people that I work with who want to become more creative, is that I give them the assignment to take 15 to 20 minutes a day, and let's just say start with classical music. And I want you to start listening, in addition to the entire symphony, the entire orchestra playing, I want you to start listening to the percussion section just by itself, as if that's all your ears were hearing. Then listen to the strings. Then listen for the oboe. Then listen to the cellos. Then listen to the trumpets. So that I think it's important, and that's just classical music. If you're listening to Indian music, to listen to the rhythmic pattern of the sitar, of how it's taking you in multiple directions simultaneously, because of the nature of the instrument and the strings, is that it does that. That's why the sitar is my favorite type of music to listen to, and then classical. So sitting and spending time either daily or weekly, listening to music with your eyes closed. I like to do it with headphones and a blinder on. Then listening to all the sub-nuances of whatever it is that you're listening to. So if you're listening, and let's say you want to listen to Simon and Garfunkel, or you want to listen to Sarah McLachlan, listen to the lyrics first go around, then replay the song. Now listen to just the drums in the song. Replay. Now listen to the guitar parts. Replay. Now listen to the keyboards or the organ and replay. So that the mind is becoming more skillful at inner listening. Because creatives oftentimes refer to having a third ear. That they have their ears, but then there's this third dimension that they listen and they receive sound from. And it also works with the eyes also, but I just want to stay with sound for the moment. Learning to listen, and that's why most creatives I interviewed in the book called Creativity shared with me that they spend time daily listening to the voice that quietly resides from the within. Listening to the voice like a river or a stream that quietly resides from the voice within. And that's really important.
Wow, that's profound. So this has been quite a delight. I know you've got to go real soon. So do you want to just tell people where they can get your book or anything else you want to share with everybody? Yeah.
Wise Mind, Open Mind can be got on Amazon as a digital book now. Core Creativity, hard copy, just came out last year. All booksellers, you can order it online and they'll deliver it to you in a hard copy or a digital copy. And then the best way to make contact with me is through corecreativity.com or ronaldalexander.com.
Nice. Well, it's been a great pleasure to have you on. And yeah, it's just great to just soak in all your wisdom and energy, everything you had to share. And I'm grateful you come on to the show today.
Been a delight, Daniel.
All right. And to our audience, keep on tuning in. We'll keep on rocking it here with Source and the Light, right? We'll keep rocking it here for you. Tune in the next time. See you next time. For listening to Spirits for Rockstar podcast. Stay tuned for our next upcoming new episodes each Saturday. Please be sure to subscribe, rate, and review to help us to serve you best. As a reminder, you can get your free Meditate and Make Money meditation at www.yoursacredpurpose.com to rock your sacred purpose. Goodbye for now, everybody.